So, Brendan, could you tell us a little bit more about what you see being the opportunities and threats to British business when it comes to cybersecurity?
I think over the last few years, what we've seen has been a real massive culture shift amongst attackers in terms of where they're trying to attack and what they're trying to do. And a lot of businesses have been listening to messages that have been put out by the cyber industry over the last few years about securing their boundaries, securing their perimeters, getting their internal networks segregated, partitioning off their systems to make them safer. And I think it's really good that message has gone across and has been followed. What we're now seeing is the attackers who are always one step ahead of us. It's always that war attrition. They've now pushed forward into new styles of attack, and they have realised that the weakest link in the chain is always going to be the person. So we've seen one of the more successful attacks that have happened over the last few years, almost without fail, those have been attacks that have been perpetrated against individuals, and that those have then allowed them to progress their way into the network. And obviously the two really big attack vectors that we've seen so far have been phishing attacks, particularly spear phishing attacks, and also mobile device or mobile laptop attacks. And those are really the big ways that people are getting in now. I think for the first one, spear phishing, everybody thinks they know what a phishing email looks like. You look at them every day, you see them coming through in your spam filter. They always look a little bit dodgy, the messaging content isn't quite right, the logos aren't right. You think you know what those are, but what we're seeing is that the spear phishing attacks, so those really targeted attacks against individuals, are actually getting through and being quite successful on a lot of occasions. So we've seen whether they're trying to fraud you into sending money somewhere, which is quite a good tactic, or whether they're trying to get you to open a worksheet or a link which then downloads some form of malware onto your network. Those are proving to be really successful attacks at the moment. So for businesses, what we're saying to them now is that their real challenge is to increase awareness amongst their staff and to increase safe behavior, so that yes, you might have an email that looks like it's from your boss. Yes, they might be saying they're just about to get on a flight, they're just about to fly away, they're going to be out of contact and they need this important document, or they need you to send this amount of money or do this particular action. Actually to stop and think, is this real? Put that phone call in and say, did you just send me this email? Because there's a good chance that it might not actually be the person who it sounds like it's coming from. So I think a lot of people are really on the low end of that education spectrum, and for businesses that's the real challenge. Mobile workers, obviously the presentation I'm giving today is all about mobile working and the risks to mobile devices. Convenience has become something of a buzzword when you're moving around nowadays. Everybody wants to be connected all the time. And so things like mobile Wi-Fi networks, open hotspots, they present a real risk because your average user doesn't understand the threat. And the ubiquity of these networks everywhere at train stations, cafes, airports, first thing people do is they'll connect. They don't think necessarily about whether they're connecting. A lot of users don't have the technical knowledge to understand whether the network they're connecting to is secure in any way, whether it's actually the network that they think it is. And if you look around, even at public events like this, you probably find quite a few Wi-Fis, and you don't know which one is actually the venue one. If you're at an airport, how do you know of the 7 or 8 Wi-Fis there, which one is the real one? Could they be somebody trying to spoof you? And I think that those sort of threats, those attacks against people using basic human behaviour, those little conveniences, those little shortcuts everybody takes all the time, it's that sort of thing that is the real threat nowadays, rather than banging at the door, because that's a much harder way for attackers to get in. It takes a lot of time and energy. They're not doing that. They're finding the easy way in.
So, what practical advice would you give to business in order to make sure that they're best equipped to deal with cybersecurity threats?
Well, I'd say certainly from a point of view of mobile devices, mobile workers, treat your laptop endpoints and your mobile phone endpoints as some of the most vulnerable resources you had. And they've often been the second, third line worth of resource attention, whereas people really need to start paying attention to those. If your users don't need to be connecting to networks outside, don't let them to connect to them. Sometimes you'll get a trade-off in convenience, and it's up to every business to work out what the best way to manage that is. But we're seeing a lot of really innovative technologies now that allow you to ensure that all the traffic that your users are sending, without even needing to knowingly connect to a VPN, it's all secured, it's all encrypted. So businesses can take advantage of these technologies. You just need to actually spend the time and energy investing them. But realistically, user education is always going to be the big key. As long as users are aware of what the risks are, as long as they're taking those few moments to think, then you'll be on a better track than we are at the moment.
Whose job, are we all right, Nick? Whose job is it to keep the UK cyber secure?
Well, I think it comes down to each and every person in the UK, and that's individual consumers, that's down to businesses, it's down to regulators, it's down to the government. The advice has to come from the centre, it has to promulgate out, and the people making policy decisions need to understand that people are people, they behave in human ways, and that telling people to make ridiculously long, complex passwords is only going to result in them writing them down on a post-it under their keyboard. And it's those sort of things that are started to be realised in the last few years. So realistically, everybody needs that basic level of education. But organisations do have their part to play. If you're a banking website, you need to make sure that you're making it as easy as possible for your users to access your site in a secure way. Maybe you don't support Windows XP anymore, and yes, there are a lot of people still using that, but there's a bit of bravery involved there in saying, you can't use this website because you're using old technology, because it's completely insecure. You need to upgrade, and here are places you can go, here are ways to help. So I think the tech industry, business, government, and individual users, everyone has a part to play in ensuring their education to keep us safe.